Mike Rattle was not a man prone to fantasies. In his 50s, he had spent most of his life on the waves of Lake Michigan, hauling nets reeking of fish and brine. He had a wife, 2 grown sons, a mortgage, and a steady catch that was just enough to get by. His world was simple and familiar, like an old fishing rod. So, when his nets, meant to hold a couple tons of perch, pulled taut and revealed not a massive sturgeon but a perfectly smooth, gleaming silver disc, Mike thought he must be suffering from heat stroke. The disc was just over a meter across, seamless, as if cast from a single piece of metal. It was incredibly heavy, but Mike, with his old, calloused hands, somehow managed to haul it aboard. The disc gave off a faint scent of ozone, like the air after a summer storm. To the touch, it was ice cold, even under the scorching July sun. Mike rapped it with his knuckles. The sound was dull, like striking stone. But the strangest part was that the disc vibrated, just slightly, as if something inside it was waiting. Mike pressed his ear to the cold surface and heard a faint pulse, slow and steady, unlike any machine he'd ever known. He was just a few miles from shore, but it felt like he was on another planet. Mike hid the disc in the old shed behind his house, covering it with a tarp. He tried to keep it secret, but the silence weighed on him. He tried everything, a hammer, a crowbar, even a sledgehammer. But the flawless surface bore no mark. The disc still gave off that ozone smell, and its vibration had grown a little stronger, as if it were pulsing in sync with Mike's own heartbeat. The strangeness escalated over the next few days. Last night, as Mike tried to fall asleep, he clearly heard a whisper coming from the shed. He couldn't make out the words, but the voice was insistent, almost pleading. That same night, the dreams began, vivid, unsettling visions of distant stars and an overwhelming sense of loneliness. He woke drenched in sweat, ears ringing with an alien sorrow. During the day, he noticed his trusty compass, which had always sat in his toolbox, now pointed unerringly toward the shed no matter how he turned it. Eventually, Mike gave in and drove to the local library, where he found old newspaper clippings. Stories he had once dismissed as tourist lore now seemed like ominous warnings. Over the past 100 years, there had been several unexplained disappearances of boats and even small planes in the Great Lakes region. One report from 1957 told of a farmer who claimed his tractor was lifted into the air by a shining disc and returned with an intact but utterly dead engine. The local Ojibwe spoke of the breath of the water spirit, which sometimes descended from the skies to take something important, leaving behind only hollow stones that sing in the dark. Mike returned to the shed and sat beside the disc. The whispering had grown clearer. Now he heard it not with his ears, but inside his head. They weren't words, but thoughts. Images filled with alien information. He saw endless stretches of space, other worlds beyond comprehension, and felt a weariness as ancient as the universe itself. The disc wasn't just a metal object. It was a life form, or at least a vessel for an alien consciousness lost in a foreign world. And that consciousness was desperately trying to make contact, using Mike as its last hope. The whispering became unbearable. It seemed to emanate from everything in the house, from the walls, from the water in the pipes. It wasn't fear, but an overwhelming mental presence that made his temples throb. He knew he had to go back to the disc. His wife, worried by his pale appearance and sleepless nights, suggested calling a doctor, but Mike just waved her off. He was on the brink, and he knew it. That night, under the light of the full moon streaming through the gaps in the shed walls, Mike touched the disc again. The cold, the pulsing, the whisper, they all merged into one overwhelming sensation. Images flooded his mind, not in fragments, but in torrents. Dying worlds, collapsing stars, civilizations turning to dust. He saw their journey, an endless drift through the void. A lonely search for something lost, or someone who could understand. The disc wasn't just a ship or device. It was an arc of consciousness, the last remnant of a long-vanished race. Adrift in the abyss. They didn't want to harm anyone. They just wanted to be heard. Without knowing how, Mike began to respond, not in words, but in pure emotions. Images from his own life. The laughter of children, the warmth of the lake sun, the smell of fish, the love of his wife. He showed them his world, small, ordinary, but vibrantly human. For a long moment, the alien mind absorbed his memories, and Mike absorbed their endless sorrow. The disc's vibration grew stronger, turning into a soft hum that filled the entire shed. Then, with one final surge of alien images, distant suns twinkling in unfamiliar constellations, the hum reached a peak and stopped abruptly. The shed fell into complete silence. The smell of ozone was gone. Mike pulled his hand away. The disc still lay on the floor, but now it was utterly cold and silent. No vibration, no pulse. Just a piece of silvery metal, heavy and inert. Mike carried it back to the lake and, with all his strength, hurled it into the water. A heavy splash, and the disc disappeared into the dark depths. He went home, got into bed, and for the first time in many nights, fell into a deep, peaceful sleep. Mike awoke with an incredible sense of relief. The nightmares were gone. His mind was clear. He brewed coffee, kissed his wife, and went to the kitchen to grab his favorite mug. It was there on the shelf, as always, white with a blue stripe. But at the bottom, right in the center of the lighthouse emblem, a tiny, barely visible, perfectly round silver dot had appeared. It shimmered in the light, and Mike could swear that, if you looked closely, it seemed to faintly vibrate.